class. Welcome back. I miss you guys. It's not the same, and I'm really missing the end of the school year feel. It doesn't really feel like the end of the school year, but we only have class today, Thursday, and then we have Monday and Wednesday of next week. So it's getting real. It's getting close. So I hope you guys are doing all right, and I hope you're staying positive and encouraged. And I want you guys to know that I do miss you guys, and I hope that you guys are doing well, and I hope that you do reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. But I hope you're excited to finish the chapter. We're actually in the last chapter of the book, and we're going to finish the book. I think this is the first time in my whole teaching career that I've ever finished a book. So I'm super excited to do that with you guys. We are beginning chapter 24. We are on page 385 in defense of freedom, and we see freedom being attacked very quickly. So the man that you see on page 385 is George W. Bush. This is the son of George H.W. Bush, who was a president. In fact, George W. Bush becomes the second president to have a father that was a president before him. So he's presidential material, definitely. And his wife is next to him. And they were a favorite in the US, but they barely won the election. In fact, there was this huge scandal of the election. You think the presidential election with Donald Trump was bad? This one was about as bad as this past election with President Trump against Clinton. So, Bush versus Gore, in fact, several books have been written about it, and honestly, Al Gore is probably still upset about it today. It's pretty funny. I'll never forget. I was a young child at this point. I remember listening to this whole election. I didn't really know what was going on, but I remember watching the TV, and the camera was on Al Gore, and he heard the news that he had lost the race. And I remember distinctly my mom saying that man does not look happy. But there were a bunch of people in the room. I didn't know who she was talking about. I didn't know why he wasn't happy. But I'm like, who's not happy? Like, I don't want anyone not to be happy, and it made me sad. But she was talking to Al Gore, not to, but about Al Gore, and he was not very happy. In fact, he's going to call for a recount. Now, with this election, most people will favor Bush, but because of the liberal media that we see today, and the Democratic Party are really going to push Al Gore. So there's this big push for Al Gore, but yet we see most of the people do side with Bush. So since Gore had such a big push, he's going to keep it pretty close. Well, there was this big scandal in Florida. Imagine that. So Florida has always been back and forth. Florida has never always been Republican. Florida will go Republican, Democrat. If you're running for president, you have no idea what Florida is going to do for you. If you're a Republican, you can't count Florida. Now, if you're a Republican, you can almost always count Texas, right? You can always count on Wyoming, these western states. If you're Democrat, you can always count on New York. You can always count on California. But Florida is one of these what we call swing states that it goes either way. Well, it was crucial in this election. In fact, these early projections are projecting Florida to go to Bush, so they think Bush has won. But Gore says, no, 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 we want a recount. Well, they called for this recount so many times that it actually works itself up to the Supreme Court, and they say, okay, can he do this? And the Supreme Court said no. So they declared Bush the winner. Well, it turns out later that whenever they finished all the recounts, that Bush actually won. So it didn't really matter. But one reason why the liberal media did not want Bush is because he was a very outspoken Christian. In fact, he was not ashamed of his Christian testimony, and he publicly confessed Jesus as his Savior, and he publicly stood against abortion. In fact, on page 386, you can see he pushed for abortion laws, strict abortion laws to stop abortion. In fact, there was this partial birth abortion that was horrible. And I don't want to get into details, but he creates his bill to stop it, and it passes through Congress. And this puts a lot of limitations on abortions, and many states are going to put limitations on abortion. So it was a big win for him, and for pro-life. Well, he's also going to try and stimulate the economy or to build the economy back up, and one thing he's going to do with that is taxes. So he kind of looks like a Reagan at this point. Not, I don't want to compare him to Reagan because I don't think he matches up to Reagan, but he was a very good president in the beginning. Now, later on, we're going to see in his second term, he kind of starts to go downhill, but he starts off very strong, and he's a very good president. Now, one um, we see the discourse in the election, but what really unifies the country around him is September 11th. I remember this day very distinctly. I was in third grade. No, I'm sorry, I was in second grade. Yeah, very distinctly. I was in second grade. I was in school, and I remember coming back from recess, and my teacher had the TV on. My teacher never had the TV on. It was about 9:15 in the morning, 9:10, something like that. And we come in, and she's got the news on. And I remember it was very solemn. Like, even though we were in second grade, we still kind of knew something was going on. And we ended up going home early that day. Schools closed because of this attack because we didn't know what was going on. What had happened was these terrorists from Al Qaeda, the terrorist group, were hijackers on an airplane, on the big 767s. They hijacked several planes. So the first plane they hijacked was going from Boston all the way to California, Los Angeles. And that they did that strategically because it'd be the max amount of jet fuel. So they hijacked this plane and they then head straight for New York. And as testimonies say, that in New York they see this plane flying low, and that's super abnormal, especially over this part of the city, and then it slams right into the tower, the North Tower. And people just thought it was an accident. They didn't know what was going on until a couple of minutes later, and all the news cameras are on the tower. They're going over the news. They're showing this crash. They're calling it an accident. They don't know what it was, an explosion, a plane, small plane is what they first thought. And then everyone sees, like you see pictured on 387, everyone sees the second plane crashing, and it was horrific because literally the whole world is watching, and then the second plane hits, and your mind goes to those people inside the plane, inside the towers, the people above where the plane hit. In fact, the second plane, when it hits a more structural place in the building to where the second building, the South Tower, falls first. So because of the jet fuel, because of the burning of it, the tower will fall less than an hour later. And then the North Tower, the first tower that got hit, will fall as well. So these two towers that was the World Trade Center, this was a big economic trading center, will go down. Several of the buildings around it will also catch fire and burn down. But this is just a horrific time in America. But it wasn't just those two buildings. There were other hijackers that got on a plane and crashed right into the Pentagon. The Pentagon is the military headquarters in Washington, D.C. They crashed there, and there was another plane that crashed, but it crashed in a field because the passengers on board knew what was going on, and they took back the plane. But they were not able to successfully land the plane. It crashes in a field, no one survives. But many speculate that that was either going to the White House or going to Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. So we don't know where that plane was going, but it was a scary day for America because no one knows what was going on. They didn't know how many more people were hijacking planes. In fact, no one flew after that for the rest of the day. In fact, for a couple days after. I'll never forget my dad was in Belarus, which is in very close to Russia during that time. He was on a mission trip. And I remember my mom being scared because she had no idea when he would be able to come home because the airplanes in the airport shut down. Well, we'll eventually get back to normal, especially with President Bush coming to rally the country together. And his famous statement, "Freedom isn't itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended." So he stands up, he rallies the country, and many police officers, firemen. In fact, my best friend in in elementary school, his dad was a police officer, and he went out to New York and helped to look for survivors. People all across the country are going to come to these sites to look for survivors to help with the cleanup. It's going to take days, months, um, to clean up the rubble. So the country's going to come together. We see thousands praying. We see people coming back to God, looking to God for help and strength. It was an amazing time, and to think where we come from since then. But it unifies the country together and really kind of puts our mindset on one enemy, which was Al Qaeda. And the leader of this, the man behind this attack, was Osama bin Laden. So Bush will really they'll go to Congress and say we need to not necessarily declare war, but we need to go after these people. So he'll get permission. He gets Congress permission, which some of the Democrats say that he didn't. It was just him. But one thing that he's really going to push for is this Department of Homeland Security. This is one branch of this is TSA. This is another reason why airports are so crazy with security. But we don't see the Department of Homeland Security until this event, September 11th. If you ever get a chance, I would YouTube the video In My Seat. I highly recommend it. An amazing testimony of a guy who was supposed to fly the airplane that crashed into the building. But the day before, he actually gets called off of that flight and another pilot takes his place. An amazing story. Look it up, In My Seat. It's on YouTube. I highly recommend it. It's amazing Christian testimony as well. So we go to war and we go after the group, the terrorist group. Specifically, the Taliban was another group, and what's going to allow us to go after them is this mentality of the Bush Doctrine, as it's called, is this preemptive strike. Not waiting on us to get hit, but we're going to hit you before you can hit us. And so we go over to the Middle East and we go to this Operation Enduring Freedom. It wasn't a war, but it was our mission of taking out the the bad people, if you will, the terrorists. So the Taliban is really where we're after, and we're really going to focus on these countries of Iraq and Iran, and North Korea will be get involved as well. These are the core countries behind it. Well, because of this, the country really rallies behind Bush, and he's going to win the next election, 2004. I remember this election, and there was a lot of controversy, especially the difference between Kerry and Bush. And Kerry will get some following, but he does not get as much as Bush, and Bush is going to greatly surpass Kerry, and there's no dispute about the 2004 election. So he wins a second term. But it's kind of from this point kind of downhill for Bush because he's not able to get the leader of the attack, Osama bin Laden. He tries, but he doesn't. In fact, another bad mark that not bad mark that we would say, but another thing the Democrats will attack him over is the Supreme Court justices. As president, one of the privileges that you get is to appoint justices that have to be confirmed. Remember, Kavanaugh was recent that Trump did. Well, here Bush has the right, and he puts in Roberts and Alito. And these two are very conservative. In fact, Alito had this whole scandal, kind of like Kavanaugh, but with Kavanaugh, there was a girl that came forward saying that he is not worthy of the position. Alito was not like that. He didn't have these false accusations. It was just the Democratic Party trying to stop him, which they weren't successful. But speaking of the Democrats, they're really going to feed on Bush's failure to end the Iraqi war. They're going to kind of smudge this in his face and degrade him with this. And so much so that 2 years into his second presidency, we have another election, and the Republicans lose the majority in the House and the Senate. So now the Democrats are in the House and the Senate, and it's Bush kind of by himself. And since the Democrats had that power, they will choose a Speaker of the House, which they choose Nancy Pelosi. That name sounds familiar. and she is currently the Speaker of the House, and we see her acting today. So we'll look at the next section next time.